a report on this. Good. So what I'm going to do now is I'll not take up any more time. I'm going to present individually first each of the presenters before they start. Each of the presenters is going to have 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes for their presentation, so that we have some time afterwards for discussion. And our first presenter is Ms. Cassiopee Mairiaux from Plan International. Her educational background is in population science and development, and she's a research officer for Plan International in Belgium. She's representing here the whole staff of Plan International. She has also developed expertise on gender and LGBTIQA+ studies with a focus on intersectionality. And Cassiopee, the floor is yours. Please open your presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Yes. Okay. Up. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it. You can perhaps start slideshow from the beginning so that.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. So today I'll be presenting a Plan International survey about COVID-19 and the education responses in West and Central Africa. So this survey took place at the end of 2020 in 8 countries. So as you can see, in Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Guinea, Mali, Niger, and Nigeria. And the study was conducted through both questionnaires distributed by Plan International staff and also based on governmental sources. But before I dive into the specific of the countries we surveyed and the data we got, let's first go back to the COVID-19 pandemic in regard with education. So as you may know, I think that you all know that, but in March 2020, over 190 countries declared school closures, meaning that this measures affected 1.5 billion students worldwide, meaning that it was 91% of the world student population, and 297 million of which are in sub-Saharan Africa. But if we look at the region that will interest us today, so West and Central Africa, this means that 128 million children were affected by said school closures, making the region the 5th ranked in terms of days of school closures. But it's also important to remember that this happens in a region where education is already facing gender inequality, but also conflicts, violence, poverty, and so on. So to dive in a bit more into the responses by the governments, as we have mainly seen, school closures did not mean that education fully stopped. Governments tried to implement distance learning through a variety of technologies like radio, television, online platforms, and so on, but also through the use of printed materials and lessons. And we must note that worldwide, internet was the most used tool, but low-income countries relied more on radio and television, while in the world, 53% of our households do not have access to internet. It goes up to 80% for sub-Saharan Africa, for example. It's also important to know that today, no schools are still closed because of COVID in that region. Some schools are still closed, but because of conflicts in the region and not because of COVID-19. So governments also had to think about the reopening of schools, and we see measures such as the implementation of the mask for everyone, sanitary measures, but they also had to adapt regarding the school year because a lot of time was lost. But fortunately, the school year was validated and there was a focus on the examination classes to try and manage this lost time during the pandemic. So we see they took measures like distance learning and coming back to school while focusing on these classes, so the examination classes. And today we also see that other measures have been implemented to allow students to catch up, and school had to be more flexible in their evaluation to limit the year repetition, which seems to have worked as we see a limited impact of COVID on the year repetition. Besides that, governments also put in place campaigns about COVID, the risk prevention, etc., but also information about the reopening of schools to prepare students to come back. But even though measures were implemented, some challenges were inevitably faced during this period. And the first thing to look at is that, yes, measures were implemented, but there was no systematic measurements, no tracking of the coverage of the program. But we have to keep in mind that internet-based solution or even technological-based solution for the distance education created disparities among students. But due to the lack of monitoring, we did not have any data on the extent of the coverage of the measures about distance learning. But we can think about accessibility for children with disability or the access to those technologies in rural areas or even internet as we saw, the difference in percentage of the access to internet. And for girls, we also have the problem of the digital gender divide, meaning that there is still a difference in skills, in digital skills for boys and girls. So all this means that only the self-learning materials distributed was the only solution with the potential to reach children across all situations. But even with that, we still have a lack of monitoring of the children's learning. And thus there is, because there was no interaction between the teacher and the students. Another point is also that studying at home meant that caregivers had a big role to play, and this was no such easy task as education was not their only concern with the economic uncertainty, for example, but also the potential lack of digital skills or cultural restriction on the use of technological devices. And as I said, we saw that there was limited measurements to help children at risk, measures to help children at risk. But we can still see some, like the dignity kits distributed, education materials adapted to certain children, special education program, and so on. For example, we see for girls that there is an increase in our household chores, and it was higher than for boys, meaning that they had less time to dedicated to education. And so the lack of measures is impacting them even more. In this situation, like we saw with Ebola, we also see that mental health is crucial, and long-term confinement and isolation decrease young people support network, and it increases stress, anxiety, and we see that almost no measures were undertaken regarding mental health. Some countries trained teachers to integrate psychosocial support in their program, but this was the extent of the measures linked to mental health. There was nothing more. We also see a limited support for teachers themselves, as the main focus was only to deliver content to the students, but except that in the surveyed country, there was a very limited support to teachers. Now for the challenge regarding the return to schools, we have to remember that the pandemic happened in a region where there was already a pre-existing situation with its own challenges. And this study corroborates other researches, meaning that unfortunately school reopenings did not mean that all children came back to school. And for example, in a planned international intervention zone in Benin, 12% of the sampled children did not return to school. One of the reasons being that the context of insecurity, as I said before, is still affecting the region and education. And these attacks and insecurity means that children are prevented to go to class. But there is also the fear of contracting COVID, preventing caregivers to send their children to school. On top of that, with the economic crisis and the poverty, population have been severely affected by the simultaneous increase in expenditures and the loss of jobs incomes, impacting their abilities to pay for school-related fees. This situation also led families to push children to drop out of school in order to have an income-generating activity to meet the needs of the family. And in these situations, girls are the most exposed to the risk of economic or sexual exploitation. The Malala Fund, for instance, estimates that around 20 million girls may not return to school when they reopen due to factors such as early marriage, pregnancies, increased poverty, amongst others. Now for the responses from Plan International regarding education, we see more general answers like the support in the distance learning program, the distribution of hygiene materials, hand washing station. There is an organization of training on COVID-19 for the staff on prevention. We also organized awareness campaigns and information campaign about COVID, about the return to school, about the importance of education as a whole. But the organization also provided more targeted responses in order to support at-risk children, like with dignity kids or kids for children with a disability. And we focused on the mental health and psychosocial support of children, but also teachers, and we collaborated for the completion of the school year. All of this led us to think about the situation and what should now be our priorities, but also government's priorities regarding education. So as you can see, we have a list of priorities and recommendations, but I will only address a few of them, but you can find out more about it in our research. As mentioned previously, it's important to pay attention to the return to school. And even though schools are not closed anymore because of COVID, we have to pay attention to the reintegration of every child and adolescent into the school system, while paying extra attention to the girls. As the longer they stay out of school, the more the chance of them coming back to school decreases due to pregnancy, marriage, gender-based violence as a whole. This pandemic also showed that it's really important to develop distance education solutions that include the need of the learners, while thinking about the fact that those needs are diverse and should be taken into consideration. It's important to consider the equitable deployment of the solution to ensure vulnerable children are reached and no child is left behind. Moreover, mental health should also be a priority, as studies have shown the impact of isolation and confinement on the psychological well-being of children and young people. But support for teachers should also be thought about in such situation, support that should also come in the form of adequate training on how to support learners, but also on things like digital media, for instance. To conclude, I would like to add that children and young people, schools are more than just education. It allows them to access a wide range of support, being food, health, stability, but also support systems through their friends. All this being crucial to their physical health, but also mental health, which should also be a concern we think about in such situation. So if you want to read more in details or study, you can scan the code, or there is also the link if you want. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Excellent timing. I have some questions, but I'll keep this for the end.
Okay.
And now I would like to introduce our next presenter, Mr. Don Lucey from Misean Cara, who is going to speak about promoting positive change to combat the consequences of climate change. And Don is a project officer for Misean Cara, and he has been working in the field of development in the humanitarian sector for 15 years, 4 out of which has been in South Sudan. His expertise is in income generation, livelihoods, and climate resilient projects across the global South. Don, the floor is yours. Please upload your presentation.
Thank you very much, Galia. And thank you also to Cassiopee for her excellent presentation on the effects of COVID-19, especially for girl children. Sorry, I'll just share my screen there now again. 1 second. So thumbs up, Galia, if you can see my presentation.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, we can see it. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you. Apologies that you can't see me, but because of my internet, I'm going to just focus everything onto my presentation. And if you have any questions or anything afterwards, you can feel free to contact me. Thank you, Galia, for the introduction. My name is Don Lucey. and I am the Livelihoods Officer for Mission Cara. It's a pleasure to be here today. For those of you who don't know, Mission Cara is an international and Irish faith-based missionary movement. In 2020, we supported 384 projects in 51 countries around the world, and we improved the lives of 1.87 million people. And the projects were worth over 13 million euros. But today I want to tell you about the transforming work of our members to combat the devastating consequences of climate change, especially for small-scale farmers in the climate vulnerable countries in the south. And when I'm talking about small-scale farmers, I'm talking about farmers with less than 2 hectares of land. So firstly, I want to look at the global context, namely the climate crisis that we have. Many of the projects that we support in Mission Cara are affected by climate change, and it has a major impact on the livelihoods of the poor, especially small-scale farmers like the one you see on the picture there. His name is Joseph from Baraka in Kenya. And people on the margins often suffer the most from environmental damage caused by increased flooding, longer droughts, more soil erosion, and increased biodiversity loss. And compounding these problems is the projected population growth. So over the coming decades, most of the growth in the world's population will be in the global south, where many people depend on rain-fed agriculture for their survival. Africa's population, as you can see there on the right, is expected to double by 2.5 billion or 2.5 billion by 2050. And if you compare it to Europe, Europe's population is actually going to decrease slightly in 2050. So that's going to be a major concern on how we're going to drive up the demand for climate resilient livelihoods and improve food security, especially for places like Africa, where the population will double. 60% of the world's uncultivated is located in Africa. So African farmers face increasing susceptibility due to climate change. And notably, women and girls are more severely affected by climate change than men. And they constitute much of the agricultural labor force in small scale and subsistence farms and encounter the effects of climate change firsthand. They also work in a patriarchal society, limiting their ability to make decisions such as land ownership and having access to credit. So for these reasons, Mission Cara not only focuses on empowering men, but also women farmers. Strategy for the last 4 years, livelihoods has been one of our strategic goals, but there is a big focus to strengthen people's economic and environmental resilience. So in 2020, Mission Cara spent 1.8 million euros supporting 68,000 small-scale farmers in 15 countries from across Latin America to Africa and Southeast Asia. And when we're talking about resilience, what we're talking about is the capacity to manage stress and to bounce back from distress, but also the ability to do so repeatedly. But if global temperatures continue to rise above 1.5 degrees, as they're currently discussing in COP26 this week, it will be increasingly difficult for small-scale farmers to adapt and be more resilient and to bounce back from these crises. Preventing temperatures rising by the 1.5 degrees target requires almost halving our CO2 emissions by 2030 and cutting them to net zero by 2050. So it's going to be a major challenge for us in the coming decades to support these small-scale farmers. It's also worth looking at our global food system. I mean, we saw firsthand how the global food system was affected by COVID-19 last year. There's currently 7.9 billion people in the world, and 608 million small-scale farmers produce 80% of their food. And for those small scale farmers, they're predominantly dependent on rain-fed agriculture to create that food. But as I was saying, the population is going to grow by 2050. So the projected population is 9.8 billion people by 2050, which is a 24% increase. And let's not forget food waste. Up to 30% of food is wasted every year. And if it was an actual country, it would be the third biggest emitter of greenhouse gases after China and the USA. So global food systems need to be more local. As I said, we saw the effects of COVID on our food system. So cutting down on food waste and making food systems sustainable and more local is key to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. The IPCC report on climate change was published earlier this year, and it highlights the worsening of the greenhouse effect. The more we pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the more hostile our environment becomes, and this becomes very serious for farmers. And of course, the science is undeniable. As you can see on the graph there on the right, increased carbon dioxide is increasing global temperatures with devastating effect on our farmers' livelihoods and food security. Historically, storms and droughts have always been there, and nobody's denying that, but they're becoming more frequent because of climate change. This is from the IPCC report again. As you can see, the CO2 concentrations have been the highest in 2 million years, and the sea levels continue to rise at unprecedented rates. The Arctic Sea is at its lowest level in 1,000 years, and the glaciers are also retreating at unprecedented levels. So all of this is really testing the resilience of our small scale farmers and humanity as a whole to bounce back. The projections for the future when it comes to extreme heat and extreme rainfall are actually quite stark as well. Back in the 1850s, we could expect a drought every 1 in 10 years. And presently, we're looking at almost a drought happening 3 of those 10 years. But if you look at the projections, if the global warming continues, you can see there the 4 degrees Celsius. I mean, basically nearly every year we'll be seeing a drought. And of course, that's going to have a major impact on countries in the global south. To a lesser extent, extreme rainfall will also increase, but you're looking at having a flood season every 3 years out of every decade. So how do we make our farmers more resilient when we're working in a future environment like that? The 50-year event, or the once in a lifetime event, is now happening more frequently as well, as you can see from this graph from the IPCC report. These catastrophic events are now happening almost 5 times more today than in the 19th century. So you can see there 5 times more happening today compared to over 100 years ago. But if you look on the right-hand side, it's going to get a lot more worse if we allow the temperature to go to the 4 degrees Celsius. And with the way we're going at the moment, we will actually hit that 4 degrees. So again, how will farmers bounce back from these problems? It's critical that we keep global temperature rises to this 1.5 degree target that the COP26 is talking about now. So now that we've looked at the context, I want to show you the ways that Mission Cara members are supporting small scale farmers. And our main focus is on sustainable agriculture. We help small scale farmers to adapt to climate change. And you can see some of the actions taken on the left, such as water harvesting, drip irrigation of crops, improved seeds, natural pest control, and even food storage, and amongst other options as well. So let's have a look in more detail now at some of the projects and the results in more detail. So for example, the Xsat project that we have in East Africa It's a project where 7 congregations are working together to promote sustainable agriculture and livelihoods to increase climate resilience. And they're working towards the SDGs. So by 2030, we should be ending poverty and ending hunger in all its forms. And the results have been quite impressive. The crop harvests have increased and the household nutrition levels have also increased. So as you can see there, some of the results, you know, the farmers have diversified their crop production. They're also using mulching to conserve water and soil and increase soil fertility. Many of them are using agroforestry to grow fruit trees, such as avocado and banana, as well as irrigation for their kitchen gardens. The improved seeds is quite an important one as well, because with improved seeds, you get a higher yield, but the plants are actually more resistant to drought and pests. So into the future, these improved seeds would be very important. This is another project that I visited in Uganda, where the project called Chin is actually focused on indigenous microorganisms. I'll speak about that later if I have time. But the energy saving stoves that you see in the picture there, I'm actually on the right-hand side. They actually support the communities to use these energy saving stoves and smokeless briquettes, which is helping to reduce deforestation. So very excellent results coming through there. Another project that I want to show you is the Augustinian Water Project in Kenya. There's a huge lack of water in the area because it's the 5th driest location in Kenya, and the dry season lasts for over 6 months. But with this gravity irrigation system that they installed, they're now able to have 4 harvests a year. And the man on the right-hand side is actually the chairperson called Joseph. And he said the following quote to me: "Don't give us food, give us water so that we can grow our own food." So don't give us food, give us water so that we can grow our own food. And I think that's very powerful, because that's exactly what we are trying to do in Mission Cara, to support and build the resilience of small-scale farmers. We have so many innovative projects as well. So for example, the presentations are using hydroponics technology in the suburbs of Lima. And as you can see, it's basically just pipes with water in it to grow your vegetables. And they've had very good results in that in the suburbs of Lima. In the background, you can see how dry it is, and there's very little land to be growing food. Another project I'd like to highlight is the one in Indonesia by the Oblates, where they were reclaiming land, and they used a flood management system to recover and reclaim land. And basically they built up the soil levels by 40 centimeters. And this helped to offset current and future rises in sea levels due to climate change. It also stopped damaging river silt runoff reaching the lagoon. And in the lagoon, you have the fish spawning grounds. So once the silt got into it, the fish weren't able to spawn. But because the farmers have been able to divert the silt runoff into their rice paddy fields, the fish have now begun to spawn again. And it's also preserved the mangrove, which is protecting the coastal area from the rising tides. That's the Irish ambassador there in the middle, actually opening up the project, and she's there with some of the local beneficiaries. I did mention IMO indigenous organisms, but because of time, I will actually proceed further. So just finally, Galia, I just want to highlight Mission Cara launched its Climate Action Awards in 2020. And it was basically to identify and recognize projects and individuals who work to address climate change and biodiversity loss. And Dina was one of our individual winners, and she received the award for in Kenya. And she worked for 3 years with thousands of women to set up tree nurseries and plant trees. And one of the women that she was helping actually had 20,000 tree seedlings and was able to sell a portion of them and make a profit of €1,000. So not only was it environmentally impactful, but it was also a great source of income to empower the local women. So just to conclude, Galia, we really do need to continue to build the climate resilience of small scale farmers so that they can continue to produce 70% of the world's food. I've basically given you an overview of the issues affecting small scale farmers due to climate change and the way that Mission Cara members are supporting them. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take questions at the end. Over to you, Galia.
Thank you very much, Don. I thought of posting some questions in the chat now, just for the presenters who have already presented to have some time to think about it. And now our next presenter is Dr. Preethi Solomon, who is a PhD scholar in social work at Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, India. She's an expert in institutional pluralism, in resource governance, in the context of marine fishing communities in Kerala, India. She has also, other than her engagement in the academia, I think it's very important information because it adds an additional perspective. She has also worked for the government, not only for, and as well as for NGOs. And actually, when I was looking at your presentations, I could see this multi-sectoral expertise in there. So the floor is yours, and please upload your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Galia, to giving this pressureful opportunity to interact with the team. So I'm also switch offing my video because I have also facing some internet issue here. So I'm directly going to my presentation. Good evening all. I'm going to talk about engaging faith-based organization on marine resource governance on the perspective of legal pluralism. So we can know that the institutional arrangements in fisheries management are found to be a complex mix of formal, informal, customary, and traditional institutions. So in India, fishing was an entirely artisanal occupation before independence, having very little intervention from the side of the government. And artificial fishing communities have their own institutional mechanisms to promote, to cater their welfare measures and also regulate fishing methods, which are evolved in a specific ecological, cultural, and social context. So the growth of modern state has impacted on these traditional institutions positively and negatively. Presently in India, state governments are responsible for waters inside the 12 nautical territorial limits, whereas the state government of India are responsible for waters between 12 to 200 nautical miles. So we can see that node state governing institutions coordinate various actors and provide norms and rules to resolve conflicting interests among contesting users to protect livelihood, economic returns, and resource health. In India, however, there exists certain skepticism about the effectiveness of community-based organization. This is because their close affiliation to the religious network. And secondly, I have already told that the impact of modern governance and socio-political developments and neoliberal market forces have negatively impacted on these traditional institutions. However, we can see that some recent studies have confirmed that these community-based or caste-based organizations continue to coordinate various governance functions in many maritime communities even today in India. So the present paper mainly discusses the dynamics between the community-based, faith-based organization and the state-led governance institutions in marine fishing communities of Kerala using the concept of institutional pluralism. So the paper mainly examines how institutional pluralism in fisheries sector opens up certain opportunities and poses some challenges for environmental and sustainable development. The study uses the typology of institutional pluralism to investigate the impact of different modes of legal plural engagements, especially with regards to livelihoods and resource conservation. A concept approach I'm discussing legal pluralism. In India, we can see that multiple state and non-state entities are involved in marine fishing governing process. So institutions relating to fishing livelihoods in India are derived from both fishing communities and the state. So this condition is mainly called legal pluralism. A legal pluralistic perspective is an appropriate opening point for identifying and understanding resource governance structures and the process in a region where long-standing community-based non-state governing institutions and the presence of uneven formal governance structures. My study area was Vilignan. It's a fishing village in the southern part of India, Kerala. So it is based on the districts of Trivandrum in Kerala. So why I chose this field is because the southern part of Kerala, especially the Vilignan fishing village, they were in the forefront of the agitation against the state-sponsored mechanization program during 1918 period. And why they against this? Because they believed that it was against their sustainable mode of fishing practices, and it is not suitable for their local fishing grounds. So on that process, they received immense support from Catholic Church and non-governmental organizations, which tried to help them to resist against any kind of incursions into their economy. This is why I chose this field for my study. So it's basically a qualitative approach to explain this existence of institutional and legalities and all. I choose a case study design. So I took the case study of Vilignan fishing village to explain the process of institutional pluralism and the conceptual approach of legal pluralistic perspective. So the data collection period was on 2018 March to 2019 May. So on that fishing village, we can see that there is a bottom level church committee called the parish council. They exercise strong governing powers within the community. It is common across the southern coast. In Kerala, we can see another trend like Kerala is a complex, especially the Kerala coast is a complex mix of Hindu, Muslim, and Muslim Christian population that is scattered across this coastal belt of Kerala. So in southern part, we can see the high presence and dominance of Christian population. So these informal legislative executive powers are vested with this parish council, and they are majorly playing the roles across that community. So it is basically elected through the democratic process. They are selected through a general body. These general bodies are coming from like multiple categories like working units of fishers, fish auctioners. They also participate. They are the part of this general body, and they are electing this parish council. So this body monitors and supervises how various rules binding fishing and fishery related activities that already existing in that village. So coming to their institutional mechanisms, we can see that two types of institutions. One is norms and the second one is working rules. So while discussing the premier norms in that community are blessing the sea, there is a belief system among the community that if they bless the sea, every year or every month they will get more cash from the sea, and they consider Sunday as a non-fishing day, and on that day they are going to the church, and they are seeking other kind of support from the church and all. And in this portion I just trying to mention the major norms and major working rules of that community. So the fourth one is levies connections. That means parish are taking some kind of amount. It's 1% in Virinam fishing village from the fishers, the working units in that village. This is because it provides fishers the access right to the fishing territories. So in India, we can see that marine fishing resource is open access. So everyone can have the chance to interact with the resource, and we can see different power structures and different knowledge systems working in that resource. It making some kind of conflict among the users. So this levies collection right of the parish act as to make access right among that fishing village. So there is another rules like fish landing rules, especially during the rough sea season. For that village, they are getting maximum yield that period. So on that time, they are restricting, they are making some kind of rules of the other working units from other village to enter into their village. So there is some kind of fish landing rules, especially during the rough sea season. The fishers from other villages won't allow to land and sell the fish between 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And there is no landing rules on the daytime. So this is because in Virinam fishing harbor, we can see that they can accommodate only 20 fishing crafts at a time. So it will create some kind of conflict between the working unit within the community and outside the community. So these fish landing rules help them to sort out the issue of landing. So other thing is fishing landing rule during off-sea season. From October to coming May, there is the working units outside the village are not allowed to land on the harbor. And they also banned LED light fishing. This is mainly to conserve their resource. They know it is ultimately their sustenance option. It is ultimately their livelihood option. They don't have any other skills or skill set, or they don't have any other livelihood option to move out from this. So they are just trying to conserve their fishing resource. So LED light fishing ban, making it more sensible and more relevant to the community to protect their resource. And they are also restricting purchasing fishes. The working units land from, they are landing the shore from the sea. So at that time, there the fish vending women and other land-based fish merchants, they should purchase fish from their own working units. They are not allowed to purchase fishes from other villages, especially during off-sea season time and all. So there is some certain kind of fish vending rule. There is some space allocation for these fish vendors to avoid conflicting interest between the working units and the merchants and the fish vendors, because the landing space is so congested. So if the fish vending women are close to the landing space, it will make some kind of conflict between them. So they have specific space to sell their fish. So the other rule is, working rule is, they have ban on plastic while fishing. And coming to the state working rules, we can see that Kerala Marine Fishing Regulation Act as a formal institutions to protect and promote the livelihood and conserve the resource. So it has a lot of positive side and bottlenecks. So first of all, there is a vessel registration and craft registration and net registration and all. And they also make trawl ban for 52 days every year. And they also ban juvenile fishing. They have actually very meaningful regulations in the field. But the problem is the monitoring system of the state is very poor. That is why the community are making their platform or their kind of interventions to protect their livelihood. So coming to the discussion part, marine fisheries management system of the state of Kerala faces many problems, especially the open access nature of the fishery and inadequate property rights. I already told that the levies collection rule of the parish helped them to make their access right, and it helped them to make a boundary in their fishing field. So it make more sensible to the community. And Kerala Marine Fishing Regulation Act also have several well-defined regulations. For example, vessel registration, mechanized fishing regulations, regulations on fishing gear, and prohibition of destructive fishing methods, etc. But the thing is, I already told that the monitoring system is poor. That is why this kind of community system is emerging and working very smoothly across the coastal belt of Kerala. So the paper trying to explore why the marginalized fisher community tended not to regard legal pluralism as a problem. This is because the fishers in Vietnam seeks to follow the parish enforced rule, because the state legal system under which they live is perceived as hostile, inefficient due to the poor monitoring system. So access to state aids requires, they are basically requires more travel, and there is some kind of red tapeism, experiencing embarrassing treatment from the officials. So they are not willing to approach the state authority. That is why they consider their parish system as a more friendly one and easily accessible to the community, and they try to follow the rules more easily and obediently. So the study raises concern about why community-based working rules are enforced through parish and why it doesn't make any possible to enforce by themselves. So its study majorly finds that the church as a social institution played a dominant role in the Catholic fishers' socio-political and economic life, and the priest act as a leader in that community. So all the central points are focused to the church. So they are approaching the church to make these kind of rules for them. So coming to the conclusion, the study has attempted to investigate the role of institutional pluralism in the governance of marine fisheries in connection with the livelihood and resource health, making use of a case study from Vietnam. The study finds that the villages parish enforced institutions functioning as much more significant than the state enforced institutions. The majority of the parish enforced working rules complement the working regulations of the state, except for the levies collection rule. The case of Vietnam has, we can see that there is no cross-scale governance, no active intermediate level institution, and no formal co-management between the state and the community. However, we cannot say it is not to say legal pluralism has created problem in this village. It's because it's only tried to fill the gaps of the state mechanism. So it acts as a complementary mechanism among the village. So the parish has enforced complementary institutions fill the bottlenecks of the state enforced institutions, but falls short of close-scale governance. Admitting the existence of community-based institutions is not the same as promoting it, but it should be done to analyze whether institutional pluralism should be promoted. So the study strongly recommends exploring more research on institutional pluralism in resource governance at the local level, because it helps to fill the gaps of state enforced institutions in addressing the sustainable livelihoods of fishers based on the nature and characteristics of resource at the local level. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Preethi. And now we have our last presenter, Rachna Shanbog, who is a Global India PhD Fellow at the School of Law and Government in Dublin City University. Like her predecessor, she also has experience in multi-sector work. She has been working in the development sector in India for the last 9 years, and she has also worked for UN Women India and for an international non-governmental organization. Her expertise refers to women and children and on rural development. And now we are going to hear about your PhD project, right? The floor is yours.
Thank you. So it's going to be a part of my PhD thesis. So good to go. I think you can see my screen.
Yeah, can you speak up a little bit or?
Okay, is this okay now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So good afternoon, everyone, and good evening to Preethi. My name is Rachna. I'm in the final months of my PhD at Dublin City University. So today's presentation is on the role of India's implementing partners in influencing donor visibility. It's a very small part of my PhD thesis. So basically, when I visited field in Nepal and Sri Lanka in the last 3 years, this came up during my interactions with the partners who are implementing India's projects. This is basically a topic that I want to explore more. So any inputs from all of you will help me take this further. So just to give you all an overview of what I'm going to cover now is a bit of my research and where does today's presentation fits in. The Indian housing projects in Sri Lanka and Nepal. Who are these implementing partners that I spoke to, and who the teams that I'm curious about, the project requirements on donor visibility, and then the team members' background and the role they play in enhancing India's visibility. So a bit about my research. I'm like I said, I'm a PhD student, and I'm looking at India's foreign aid policy. The case countries that I have are Nepal and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka and Nepal are the third and the fourth largest receivers of India's official development assistance. My PhD is basically a 3-level analysis. So I'm looking at policy level or the elite level in New Delhi. Then Kathmandu and Colombo is the second level. The third level is the community. And for the community level analysis, I picked up I chose 2 grant projects. And they're similar projects. So a quick background on these the Indian housing projects. Sri Lanka was the first project that India, one of the largest grants that India gave. This was in a post-conflict situation. You all might be aware of the civil war, the 26-year civil war that ended in 2009 May, and then right after that, the Sri Lankan government delegation led by President Mahendra Rajapaksa met the Prime Minister Dr. Singh and requested if they could provide houses, and it was agreed upon. And this was, I think, for India was largest ever grant till then. And after that, of course, the Afghan Parliament is one of the other largest grants that India has given. So basically, this is the project started in 2011. 50,000 houses in the northern province, the eastern province, and the central province. The northern and the eastern province are dominated by the Sri Lankan Tamils, and the central province is dominated by the Indian origin Tamils. The initial amount for this project was 270 million USD, and this got increased to about 300 odd million USD in the later years. In Nepal, this was a post-disaster context. This was right after the 2015 earthquake. Sushma Swaraj, who was the External Affairs Minister of India at that time, committed to 1,000 million USD for the whole post-disaster reconstruction and rehabilitation program, out of which 50,000 houses in the two districts, Gorkha and Nuwakot, got 100 million. Gorkha was the epicenter, and Nuwakot is the neighboring district there. So some of the common features of both these projects are owner-driven model houses. And when I say owner-driven model, it's basically the owners built these houses, and India, either through the Sri Lankan government or Nepal government, transfers the money to the beneficiaries directly. Then the implementation through local partners. So for me, this was important because India's ODA, the aid policy and practice, has been criticized in the sense that it doesn't have, it doesn't use its local domestic NGO experiences to implement projects, nor does it use partner countries or recipient countries, civil society organizations. But I think this changed with Sri Lanka, and then they took on the same model, more or less the same model in Nepal. So, so talking to the NGO partners became crucial here for me. So who are these implementing partners? So basically, these are UN agencies, NGOs, and there is also a government department in one of the countries, one of the case countries. The team members, as always, I mean, it's the usual practice. So they're at the national level, they're at the district level, and at the community level. So I'm, like I said, I'm curious about the donor visibility aspect here for today's presentation. So one of the project requirements on donor visibility, which has changed for India. Earlier, India did not like to, or did not use a lot of tools to showcase the work it is supporting across the global South. But it's changed in the last 7-8 years, and especially after 2014, it's changed quite a bit. So what it wants now, what it wants out of its implementing partners is that they talk about India's support through social media platforms. And so organizations are expected to create Facebook account, YouTube account, and also Twitter accounts. Then there's also a radio program in one of the implementing districts, which is broadcasted once a week every night. Once a week in the night. And then of course there are other forms of ensuring donor visibility, which is how do you take the messages to the community, and also the photos that I have here. The central two photos are what I've taken, and the corner ones are what I took from social media account of partner organizations. So if you see, there is this Nepal India logo here, and this is these two are Sri Lanka. This is a plaque in one of the beneficiary houses that I found. And this is the field logbook where it's with the beneficiary. So there is the Indian emblem and the India Sri Lanka logo. So and then there is here, which is Nepal again, and the team members are required to wear, or they actually are, they're told to wear these kits, and it could be caps and jackets or t-shirts. So what I found while interacting with them was that somehow these backgrounds, and when I say backgrounds, like the trans-border ethnic connection with for example, the Tamils, if the implementing team members are Tamils, that actually has an impact on how they approach this donor visibility aspect. Also regional background, which part of Nepal they're from. Are they from the hilly region or the plains region, which is closer to the Indian border? That also makes a difference, I felt. And also the political positioning, at that current time, what is India's relations with that particular recipient state, and sometimes even the past relations have affected how they see this donor visibility aspect. And these factors, very broadly, I mean, I've categorized them into very these two broad categories, and there's cautiousness on how to go about it, and and there's also the extra mile. So just to give you an example on how going on the extra mile, this is a house in one of the beneficiary villages. That's not an Irish flag, that's supposed to be Indian flag colors. So this is not required of the implementing partners to paint the Indian flag color on a house, but one of the team members thought it's a good idea. And this is also including singing of the national anthem and while inaugurating project or hoisting of the national flag. I felt this was going the extra mile. And in terms of being cautious, wearing the required kit, and if India and a particular country is having certain issues at that time, some of the organization members were not very comfortable wearing kit and going into the field, and also communicating who are these team members, who was supporting this project. And why do I find all of this intriguing is how these people influence perceptions and experiences at the community level. And I was introduced, like I've worked in the sector for some years, and so to me it never occurred that these aspects will make a difference on how donor visibility works out in the plays out in the community. And from what I understand during my interviews with partner team is that it's unique to India, and correct me if this is if my thinking is wrong, and because this happens with these case studies are two neighboring countries, so there is a lot more other things that are at play. So for me, I thought it happens only in the case of India and with specific to Nepal and Sri Lanka. And then from policy point of view, I felt that India and also most donors need to interact with this set of people, which is most often what happens is, I think, even as donors from the global north or donors sitting in the capitals end up talking to the national teams, and somehow they miss out on what is happening at the ground level. And it's not just for donor visibility. I mean, even as a practitioner, I felt that it kind of bridges the gap on what the communication gap on how to implement aid very effectively. So happy to get your feedback on this. And that's me. And those are my supervisors who have been guiding me over the years. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rachna. And thank you to all the presenters. Very informative, very inspiring. As you can see, I already posted some questions. However, we are happy also to take questions from our audience, and also, of course, presenters, if you have questions towards each other's presentation. Can I ask if there is a person among the audience who would like to ask a question right now, or should I ask now Cassiopee to refer to the issue that I raised in the chat? Okay, we are being shy, so can I ask Cassiopee to address the issue?
Yes, so I saw that your question was especially about vaccination. So as we are working mostly with children and young people, I think that we are not, to my knowledge, working on vaccine as such. We focus more on hygiene, barrier gesture. I don't know if you say that in English, but like social distancing, wearing the mask, avoiding contacts, etc. We make campaign, etc. We do work with communities and school on those subjects, but not really on vaccine as such. So I don't think that I can really answer your question. But we do, however, see that the equal access of the vaccine is really a fundamental human right. And so as an organization, we try to advocate for equal distribution of the vaccine worldwide to allow equal opportunity, as it's crucial to the COVID-19. But I think that's the only thing I know about that.
Okay, well, it was not absolutely my intention to imply that the measures that Plan International has planned are not sufficient. I was just wondering, because it's a key issue. Well, indeed, minors, not all minors can yet be vaccinated everywhere, but also teachers can be vaccinated. And also, so I was wondering whether it's like, whether the issue of vaccination is topic that is considered sensitive, and in order not to undermine your other activities, you're not directly dealing also with this issue.
I really don't know. I don't think that we do. We work on that topic, but I don't really know.
Thank you. And Dawn, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Galia.
So I posted also 2 questions for you.
Yes. So with regards to what countries in the north could do to learn from what Mission Cara projects are doing, I would say that you know, agriculture in the north, food systems need to be more localized. Currently, our food system is very global, so we're very dependent on other locations to get our food sources. So that's quite bad for the environment because of all of the carbon being pumped out, but also it's less secure because, as we saw with COVID-19, the shipping system seemed to come to a stop. So that affected the flow of food from these various parts of the world. So that would be the one main thing that I would say that the countries in the north could learn, is to actually make their food systems more local and to grow more of the food locally. The other question about improved seeds and biodiversity, I definitely wouldn't be going down the line of GMO seeds, because what we find with GMO is that they usually grow very well for 1 year, but once the farmer has harvested it, he has to go back and buy more seeds from the company next year. So you're in this circle of where you're stuck with the company that makes the seeds. Whereas if you're using local seeds, or maybe a crossbreed of local seeds, you could set up local seed banks. So that would create a more secure source for local farmers. But obviously, I think in the last many decades, we've probably lost a lot of that local knowledge that local farmers had. So for example, farmers in Uganda would know what type of seeds would work best in that type of environment. So I do think we need to go back to the local farmer and ask for their indigenous knowledge, because there's significant knowledge there that we can build on. So yeah, I mean, for sure, if you crossbreed a lot of the seeds, you'll get those drought resistant and growth characteristics of the different plants. And you definitely don't need to go down the GMO route, because it's just unsustainable. Thanks, Galia.
Thank you very much. And now my question to Preethi regarding the incompatibility between community-based organizations and the traditional case or religious networks. It was something that you mentioned as if it is almost self-evident, but to me it is not at all. I don't know obviously the context the way as you do. So if you could expound on this.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Galia, for the question. Actually, in India, it's the state observes religion in the strict premises of secularism. So they didn't promote religion in the premises of governance process and political process. So they're trying to keep religious influence in the private spheres. That is why they are not encouraging these kind of religiously affiliated community-based organizations in the mainstream of the state. This is the simple sentence to explain the argument of Dr. Galia. I think you got my point, right? So, or you need more explanation on that?
I'm just wondering, is there, I would really love to read more about, is there a literature, something you can post a link or something for?
Yeah, sure. I can post some literatures on that.
If there is already research, I will be very much interested to read in more detail. Okay, is there anything else you would like to add, or we move on now? Okay, and Rachna, I can see here that other than my question, there is also another question to you, which I'm going to read out as Daniel Carey cannot ask this question himself. So he's saying that he's in a shared office and he has a question to Rachna, which says that, did the move towards donor visibility represent a conscious policy shift compared to what went before? And regarding the issue of being cautious, did donor visibility drop during times of tension between India and donor countries? And did people at the community level hide their Indian connections at those times? Oh, well. And just to repeat briefly my question, it's whether does India refer to its experience as aid beneficiary in its own humanitarian development aid efforts in Nepal and Sri Lanka? Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So Daniel is a friend, but this question wasn't told to me before. So, but I'm going to combine both of your questions. So in terms of the experience, so Global South donors, India, China, and now Japan and Korea are also trying to combine both China and India and call themselves the Asia model. So they do talk about how their own experiences are being taken forward and used when they are the donors. So they feel that they are better donors than the northern donors because of the fact that they have lived these realities. They know, they know how it is to negotiate with global north donors, so they feel they're a better set of donors, and they call themselves the Asia model of aid architecture, and they think that it's going to be a parallel aid architecture that's coming up in the next few decades. And in terms of India taking forward its experience, yes, definitely. And in Nepal's case, right after the earthquake, I think a lot of what happened in our 2002 Gujarat is a western state. Prime Minister Modi was the chief minister at that point of time. So what they say, the narrative or what policy people say is that they've taken forward that experience of Gujarat model and implemented. I have, because Sri Lanka was also implemented earlier, I feel there's more parallels between the Sri Lankan model to the Nepal model than the Gujarat model. But yes, it does say that we do take forward these experiences, and also the communities are very similar culturally, religiously. I think that helps India to understand the complexities in the society. I mean, and that's why they kind of claim to be closer to closely understand these recipient countries. And yeah, so does that answer your first question, Dr. K?
Yeah, I'm good.
So now I'm going to combine your second question with Daniel's thing about visibility. So there is, again, India for a long time did not want to talk about its visibility, its ODA. I think because in one of the embassy person told me that it's a double-edged sword. Like you talk about it, then it's going to be a problem because recipient country might not like it, because India is also the dominant power, the big brother in the region. So it might not really work in its favor, but it's also important to talk, because for a long time, I think one of my first questions to Indian policymakers was that, why do we not talk about our aid? Our websites don't talk, because for me, I struggled quite a bit when I was trying to get data. And I said, you don't talk about it. There's not much data on the website. So they said, yeah, it's basically a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to the region, the South Asian region that I'm talking about. In terms of the policy shift, there has been a policy shift, and initially it was, I think it started sometime around 2013-14, and it's become quite a bit. I mean, India is pushing for a lot of visibility, and there have been scholarly works on how personalities of leaders like such as Modi has also contributed to India wanting to showcase itself as a superpower. And in Modi's case, how his visits, there's a huge talk about how he did a certain number of visits to foreign countries that Dr. Manmohan Singh didn't do in the last 10 years. So for him, I think as Modi's personality, also when he goes out and does certain things or inaugurates a temple in Nepal or inaugurates houses in Sri Lanka, that also feeds into the domestic image of the leader, and that's been talked about how and that there's a clear push about how post NDA 2, which is 2014 government, there is 2016-17 onwards, there's push for social media, and again someone said that it also kind of worked out well with Facebook and Twitter becoming very popular, and this push for visibility. And at the community level, sorry, quickly, again, Daniel's question, in one of the countries, yes, people hesitated to talk about India's support, to carry forward, to wear or do some things, that was very visibly clear that they are representative of or they're supported by India. So there was that hesitation when there were border tensions or other tensions between India and the recipient state. I hope I've covered most of what I was asked. So,
thank you very much. From our attendees, do we have some more questions from our attendees here? Not at this moment. Then maybe I would have one last question to all of our presenters. Something that I think is relevant to all our areas of interest and of work. In your particular field of work, would you say there is any opportunity, any innovation coming from the current ongoing pandemic, the influence of the pandemic on our lives and in the field that you're working in? I know we are all Zoom fatigued, and the lockdowns and the issues with vaccination, and all these are all relevant issues. And I'm not denying that the challenges are much more than any possible opportunities. But somehow I wish to try to finish on a positive note for all of us. So if there is anything you could share in your particular field, any innovations, any opportunities that came with the pandemic?
I can talk about something.
Yeah.
I mean, because I struggled with field work in the final year of my PhD, I think for me, talking to people sitting in New Delhi or sitting in Dublin, I think I didn't have to physically go to talk to a lot of my, especially in one of the case countries I had not visited, but that technology, I think by the time I started interviewing people had adapted to, were comfortable. So somehow I feel that it's an interesting change where people who cannot afford to come to the global north can still share experiences and still you can still connect with them at certain level. So if that's one positive thing that I took out of my 1 year of sitting at home and trying to collect data, and so.
Any other thoughts? Hi, Nita.
Hi, sorry, I missed most of the conversations because of the long AGM, and I was trying to be in different groups. But I just, taking from Rachna, that was a very good point, but I'm also hoping that international NGOs also do their capacity building sitting in front of laptops. They don't have to actually increase carbon footprint by flying to India or Zambia or Zimbabwe. And I think that is the ask for civil society organizations. And now, having worked with many INGOs, I can say that, and I'm hoping that that's the way it is. And it's just not one way, I hope the carbon footprint stops. Thank you.
No, I'd agree with that point as well, Nita, that in Mission Cara, for example, like we've adapted our monitoring process. So instead of actually going to the projects in Africa or Asia or wherever. We do distance monitoring through Zoom. Now, it's obviously not as strong, but we found in the last 12 months anyway, we've been quite successful in monitoring the projects at a local level, but also using local experts. So any evaluations that we've been doing, we've been hiring local people to do the evaluations, and it's been excellent work. And there's also that argument about localization of funds as well. You know, more funds have to be going into local organizations rather than having to get people from the global north flying down with all of their expertise. Yeah. And again, the point I was making about the local farmers, like there's so much local indigenous knowledge that we're not using at the moment. We really should acknowledge that knowledge that's already there on the ground and utilize it better.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Any more reflections, or are we ready to round up? Okay, I assume then that so far we are satisfied with our discussion. And I would like once again to thank you very much to our presenters. And also, if there are among the attendees people who are not yet members of Development Studies Association Ireland, you are gently reminded that you can still at any moment join the organization. And of course, you're welcome to join the Civil Society Study Group as well. Thank you very much once again. Peace to all of you. Stay strong. And see you.
Thank you for sharing it. Thank you so much.
And will you be sharing the slides on the DSAI website?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
If the participants agree, indeed, we can share your slides in addition to the recording of the session now. Is everybody happy, agreeing?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so I have the copies of your presentations. If
not me, sorry, not me.
You don't.
Oh,
okay.
Not me also, because I am also, that is also from my PhD part. It's not
Okay. It's a pity, but maybe next time. Okay, so Don and Cassiopee, would you be happy? So both. Okay, shall I post your presentations, the one that I have which are on all the draft, or you want to send me the an updated draft?
I can send you the PowerPoint if that's better, because I only sent you a PDF, which probably isn't as good.
Yes, I can send you the new version too. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, well, anyway, even if the other two presentations cannot be reached, then anybody can still see this recording. And thank you very much once again. And Preethi, I'm looking forward to receiving the links that I'm curious about this issue about. So I'm coming away enriched, and thank you once again, and take care. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.